Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We've been talking about a lot of different concepts throughout the day. One of the highlights from Kyle's keynote this morning was our view on stablecoins and how important they're going to be and how they're going to integrate with kind of everything that we do on a go-forward basis. And so we're extremely excited about stablecoins and the future of stablecoins. It's a use case that I think a lot of people can understand and many have already used. So extremely excited to have Cuy Sheffield join us from Visa, who is doing a lot in stablecoins that's live and in production today. And so Cuy's the head of crypto for Visa, so thank you very much for being here. We're very appreciative of that. You're head of crypto for Visa. I mean, Visa is this massive organization. I mean, how do you even get involved in crypto, and how do you become the head of, crypto at Visa?
Yeah, great to be here. Excited to talk about stablecoins. So I came to Visa through the acquisition of a startup called TrialPay in 2015. I didn't know anything about Visa or payments at the time. I had nothing to do with the acquisition. And so I had this really interesting experience where I got inside Visa and I started going down the payments rabbit hole and just kind of learning about the fascinating history of Visa, the complexity of the existing payments ecosystem. And I was living in San Francisco and I randomly got into crypto with a few friends. And so during the day, I would learn about payments at Visa. I'd ask people, what do you think about crypto? And it was weird and new, and nobody really knew anything about it. And then I'd go to a crypto meetup, and I was fascinated with crypto. I'd ask them about payments, and people would tell me, everyone's just going to pay for everything with Bitcoin. And it was so clear, even back in 2017, that the future is going to be some intersection of the two. And so I said, I want to spend at least the next decade of my career figuring out how these two worlds come together. And so I became the annoying crypto guy at Visa, sending out emails. Nobody asked me to do this, but I was just obsessed with this. And I think the other piece was I really started to go down the history of Visa and understand DHawk. And if you're not familiar with DHawk and the founding story of Visa, it's one of the most fascinating corporate histories out there. And DHawk was an absolute visionary. As early as the 60s, he talked about the vision for Visa was to be the premier system for value exchange. It wasn't about being a card company. And so he understood that currencies were going to be electronic, they were going to move around the world at the speed of light, and that Visa could play this massive role in coordinating an ecosystem of financial institutions, of merchants, of tech companies, to figure out how to organize all that chaos and make it work. And I think that there were so many lessons in the early days of Visa and what credit cards looked like to what crypto and stablecoins have looked like over the past 5 years. So we set up a full-time crypto team back in 2019, and we've been making a little bit of progress every week for the past 5 years, and incredibly excited about opportunities in the space.
Well, certainly appreciate you doing that. I think one of the leading indicators I think for crypto broadly is there's a Cuy Sheffield at every firm in the world. There's a Matt Shapiro at every firm in the world. I'm a former TradFi guy, and I was also the annoying guy at my old firm that really wanted to do something in crypto, and then I ended up finding my way into crypto. And so I think you see a lot of talent that recognizes this, and it's just a question of how fast can you get up and running, and how can you convince everybody around you. The interesting part about Visa is I think it's very embedded in the culture, right, of value transfer. But Visa's up and running today with crypto, with stablecoins. Can you paint a picture of what exactly is Visa doing as it relates to stablecoins today? Yeah, so
a bit of our journey, when we set up the team in 2019, we really looked at crypto as almost like a strategic client segment. And it was a subset of fintech. You had these crypto exchanges, they were merchants, they wanted to accept cards, you needed an on-ramp to get fiat in, and then they wanted to issue cards. And so we saw Crypto.com and Coinbase and many other companies come to us looking to bring cards to market. Those used to be spend your Bitcoin. And then what we saw is there wasn't really a lot of demand for people to spend Bitcoin. Those started to transition to spend against the balance of a stablecoin. And I think as stablecoins started to grow, particularly outside the United States and emerging markets, they started to really get product market fit as a store of value. People wanted access to dollars, but the problem was, even still today, there's very little merchant acceptance. If you have a stablecoin in a wallet today, good luck, go and try and spend it on something. It's very hard to do. And so we saw a big opportunity to say, how do you connect a Visa credential accepted at over 100 million merchants across the world, to a stablecoin wallet and be able to hold dollars in a bunch of countries across the world, go and tap to pay, and be able to just make that work seamlessly. And so, as we started working with these companies, we then kind of went deep into the guts of Visa Treasury and how we move money. And I think one of the fascinating things to me was that we're in 2024. We're in this world of generative AI, and it's still really hard, if not impossible, to move money on the weekends. And so if you think about how VisaNet works right now, you could tap to pay with a card. You could authorize a payment in real time. It's an amazing global messaging system, 75,000 transactions per second. We can authorize a payment. But we can't actually move the money in real time. We have to wait till the end of the day. It's 5 days a week. Well, there's a bank holiday on Monday. We have to account for that. And so there are all these complexities in terms of the financial infrastructure that VisaNet as an authorization system is built on top of. And so when we looked at stablecoins and we looked at public blockchains, we said, wait a minute, these are these new global 24/7 networks for value transfer that we can then use underneath VisaNet. And so in a way, the analogy for the crypto people is like VisaNet could just be a layer 2 itself. You could authorize a payment on VisaNet and you could settle it and you could move the value over a public blockchain. And so we started working closely with our treasury team saying, what would it mean for Visa to be able to accept stablecoins for settlement payments from issuers, pay stablecoins out to acquirers? So we launched a pilot program with a handful of initial partners. We started on Ethereum. We then expanded to Solana. And so we have live clients today that they authorize transactions on VisaNet. At the end of the day, instead of sending us money via Fedwire, they send us USDC to our Circle account. We can receive the USDC. We can then redeem it for fiat to pay out acquirers. And so we're kind of building this core stablecoin orchestration infrastructure where our view is the whole ecosystem is not going to update at the same time. We have this interesting position where we work with some of the most conservative banks all over the world that probably aren't going to touch stablecoins for the next decade. And we work with emerging fintech crypto startups that are built entirely on stablecoin rails. And so the value of Visa and Visa Treasury is that stablecoin wallet, they can enable a transaction from a balance of a stablecoin, settle it with Visa in a stablecoin, and then the traditional merchant acquirer that the consumer transacted at could receive fiat. And so we see Visa as this bridge being able to move in between many stablecoins on many chains with many fiat currencies. And there's a lot of value, and I think it's going to take a lot of time to get to the point that most financial institutions are ready to interact with this new form factor for fiat.
That's really interesting. So sitting in the center, obviously you've got crypto native groups, that want stablecoins. They want to settle instantaneously, 24/7, holidays, you name it. There's all this legacy infrastructure that maybe doesn't even know what stablecoins are, even though you offer them the ability to engage with it if they want. I mean, do you have to educate them? Like, what's the education curve there? Like, do you care if they, are they just going to see the light eventually? Like, what's been the interactions with a lot of the banks and merchant acquirers, and folks in the Visa system as it relates to crypto and stablecoins?
So I think the key principle is that, particularly the traditional financial institutions, they shouldn't have to know or care. It should just work. And that's kind of how it works with Visa today. We settle in 28 different currencies. And so when you travel and you make a cross-border payment, your bank sends us dollars. If you're in Europe, we settle with the acquirer in euros. They don't care where the consumer, who issued the card to it, what currencies. It just works. And so I think applying that same mindset to the stablecoin ecosystem, where because these two legs are decoupled, issuers could choose what currency, what rail they want to settle with Visa. Acquiring banks can choose what currency, what rail they want to receive funds. We can then enable the interoperability between it, even if both sides speak very different currencies. And so in a way, we just treat stablecoins as it's an additional currency, it's an additional rail, and we're building that core infrastructure so Visa Treasury can move money between both sides.
Got it. And then on the back end, you make it really easy, as we know, as a lot of folks in the audience certainly know, crypto is complex. It can be complex. And there are different chains and there are different assets, and you alluded to this before. You started building on Ethereum. I guess, what was your experience doing that? Today you're on Solana. I would imagine Solana allows you to do a lot of different things that you couldn't on Ethereum. How did you think about the various considerations and trade-offs for those two chains, and then how do you think about other chains as well?
Yeah. So our core principle is that we want to be stablecoin agnostic. We think there will be many stablecoins that exist, but they have to meet a certain bar for us to be comfortable in having exposure and interacting with them. And we think that it's going to be a multi-chain world, and we want to support multiple blockchains over time. But again, like there should be a bar of we're not going to support every blockchain out there, and particularly seeing a history of successful transaction volume over an extended period of time is a big deal for us. And so I think when we looked at it, given kind of that principle, then we said, okay, what demand do we see from our clients? And I think Ethereum, that was where most stablecoins were issued, and even 2-3 years ago. I think today still the majority of supply is on Ethereum, but it was pretty much only Ethereum 3 years ago when we started to explore this. And so we started with Ethereum, and we said, okay, crypto.com, you could settle transactions using Ethereum. As Solana grew, as we saw more stablecoins be issued on Solana with USDC, now with PYUSD, we started to see clients coming to us and saying, we're using Solana as core infrastructure, for the wallet that we're building, for the treasury operations that we're doing. And so we took a close look at Solana, and we were really excited about both the enterprise adoption and just the resiliency. The fact that Solana kind of went through a really challenging period, and it not only survived, but it came back stronger, and that there was this vibrant developer ecosystem, seeing more institutions, more stablecoin issuers coming into it. So we're excited to add support for Solana. We plan to add support for other chains as well. I think today I'll say the current way that we're operating these pilots in this initial use case, these are large value settlement payments. These are a couple $100,000 or $1 million moving from an issuer to Visa or Visa to an acquirer. And so gas fees, not a huge deal and challenge there. Over time, my hope and goal, and who knows how long it's going to take, is we should get closer and closer to real-time settlement. We should get to the point where you tap to pay with your Visa card at a merchant. The moment that it's authorized, money is moving from the issuer to Visa, from Visa to the acquirer, from the acquirer to the merchant, and to be able to do that all instantly. And so if you want to be able to get to more and more real time, that's where speed and throughput and cost is going to matter a lot. And that's where it's very clear Ethereum alone is not going to be able to do that. And so we're really excited to see stablecoin settlement not just end up being between an issuer and an acquirer, but go all the way through the value chain down to the merchant, maybe down to small sellers, and be able to have much more of a kind of a way that stablecoins just circulate throughout the system instead of this once a day, end of day settlement, but you can't move money on the weekends and bank holidays.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Where do you think the push for adoption comes from? Do you think it's merchants realizing hey, we have a lot more flexibility if we settle in stablecoins or banks, or do you think it comes top down, or do you think it's a reaction to users and consumers? Right. The interesting thing about stablecoins and crypto is it enables the U.S. to effectively export dollars globally, at the very granular user level, right? And so you could have a situation where you have a lot of people that decide to redenominate their wealth or denominate into dollars very natively through crypto. Can that push the merchants to start accepting it? Do you think it's a little bit of both? I guess, how do you see, what pushes adoption forward?
So in general, I think it's happening in a very bottoms-up way. And when we look at stablecoins today, what we see is this is a incredibly powerful fintech developer platform. And if you think about the history of fintech and in the past few ways of fintech, it's been very US and developed markets focused. It's been very dependent upon a handful of kind of fintech focused banks, banking as a service. It hasn't really been a global phenomenon. And so we come across companies every week that are building a stablecoin based product, whether it's a consumer-facing stablecoin neobank or wallet, whether it's a business-facing kind of corporate neobank product, but they're developers that are all over the world. And so I think that there's just going to be more and more of this bottoms-up innovation of people figuring out there's an easier, cheaper, faster way to build fintech products. And increasingly, the products themselves, I don't even think that they're going to require consumers to explicitly understand what stablecoins are. I think if we look back the past few years, stablecoins in the adoption and use of them, it was all very explicit. You were going to a crypto exchange. You were going to Binance or Coinbase. You had a crypto wallet. You knew what a private key was. You had some money for gas. You knew what you were doing in crypto, and it worked, but that was a relatively niche audience. I think the products that we're now seeing in this wave, and a big part enabled by now that you have blockchains that are fast and cheap enough to do this, is entirely abstracting away the blockchain components and the stablecoin components. If you look at Sling, what Mike Hudek is building as a good example, it looks and feels like Venmo, but the entire back end is running on stablecoins. And so I think we're going to see that more and more, where it's just a dollar-denominated financial product that can work for consumers and businesses in 150 countries across the world. And as that becomes the modern kind of back-end fintech developer platform, once developers start building there, they don't really go back. And then once they start using stablecoins and providing them to consumers, then they want to start paying employees in stablecoins, paying vendors in stablecoins, settling with card networks in stablecoins. So I think that's one area that we're seeing. And I think the second is people think a lot about a consumer paying a merchant. I think they think less about merchants doing disbursements and payouts to end consumers. And that's one of the most challenging payment products today, payment problems today. If you're a freelancer marketplace, if you're a creator platform, you have end customers that are in 100 countries across the world. You have to do cross-border payouts too, and it's just very challenging to do that. And so we're seeing more and more demand and interest in these payout use cases. And so then if you're starting to pay consumers out in stablecoins, how do you provide products that they can then hold those or then go and spend those at merchants, whether it's connecting a Visa card or paying directly? So I think we'll see a lot more of that flywheel of payouts going out cross-border, and then consumers not just off-ramping immediately, but holding a stablecoin and then spending it back, whether it's on our network or elsewhere.
So when you think about, especially on the last example that you gave, I mean, the system and the financial system today is built around what we've all known for quite some time. Do stablecoins in some way break that? And do you need new market participants to show up, right? If like, let's say you need a cross-border payment, you would typically have to go through a bank. You've got a ton of fees around it. You've got 4x fees layered on top of that. You have a weird opportunity now to kind of like deposit into somebody's wallet, right? You can kind of go around a bank. But you also need on-ramps, off-ramps. You've got local currencies. Everything is not always going to be USD. So I guess, are there new layers of the stack that need to pop up? Or new market participants that you think will grow as stablecoins evolve?
So I think today, a lot of the ecosystem, it's clearly driven by non-banks. And particularly when you think about some of the cross-border flows, one of the fascinating things that we've seen is you have these local exchanges in Mexico, in markets in Africa, in Argentina, in the Philippines, and they kind of started their business as a crypto exchange, a place that you would go to buy and sell Bitcoin. And now if you look at their volume, over half of their volume or 90% of their volume is just doing stablecoin to fiat FX. And so you could just go USDT to MXN or USDC to Kenyan shilling. And so these exchanges themselves are becoming this kind of new type of non-bank FX platform that's playing a significant role in some of these payment flows. The question is kind of how well can that scale? You have to have a lot of liquidity moving between local currencies and stablecoins to be able to enable a lot of these payout flows. And so I think in general, our view is if stablecoins are going to go from 170 billion in circulation today to 500 billion to $1 trillion, there's going to be much greater participation from banks. And we're starting to see that today. We have a network of 10,000 banks across the world that we work with very closely, both on cards as well as other products. And I think it's been challenging in certain markets. There have been regulatory barriers. There wasn't enough clarity. Banks couldn't really interact with them. In other markets, Europe, for example, I think ever since MiCA, we're seeing more and more demand from large banks in Europe. We've announced that we're working directly with BBVA. They're looking to create a stablecoin. So I think we'll see large banks come into the space, whether it's holding fiat reserves and providing settlement accounts in multiple currencies on and off ramps for existing stablecoins, or creating their own stablecoins. And as that happens, there's going to be more and more liquidity, and you'll be able to scale some of these cross-border flows that today, if it's just through a crypto exchange relying on retail volume, it's hard to scale. So I think there's a really important role for banks to play. I think there's some big questions around. We're trying to help them figure out how do you enable them with the right technology to be able to participate. But we're not going to get to $1 trillion in stablecoins without banks playing a major role.
Yeah, and I give you and Visa a lot of credit for really stepping up here and actively, actually having a product that's working today live, on chain. There's plenty of folks in the audience. There's plenty of enterprises, banks, financial institutions, you name it, that have been building in crypto, but have not been able to really take the full step and really integrate and really do it. And I think a lot of that has come down to a lack of regulatory clarity, which I think that we're going to get more of that, with a pro-crypto administration, which is great. I guess, what are the speed bumps that you guys have run into, whether it's at Visa or the folks that you work with within your payment system? Like, how do we get more catalysts to get people involved in stablecoins? Is it the regulatory side and clarity there, or is it something else?
Yeah, it takes time. Like it's very clear the direction of travel, but it takes time to get there. And I think one example is just understanding custody infrastructure, and even the idea of self-custody. If you think about products like Fireblocks, it's fascinating that you now have like non-banks that are able to manage their own keys, basically becoming their own bank. And so in the crypto world, people talk about self-custody mostly on the consumer side of, I could be my own bank and manage my own keys and I could live off the grid. I think self-custody is more interesting when you think about it from a fintech perspective, where now you can have non-bank fintechs who traditionally, every time they wanted to move money, they had to go to their bank. Now, they could actually manage keys that control money in the form of stablecoins. They could build a bunch of products they want to build. They could scale into markets that they want to go into. But that's new, and it's different. And explaining to people who've worked in payments and banking for a long time that you're now in charge of these keys. What are the risk processes and controls? All the things that I imagine many investors have had to go through if you're custodying assets directly. And then I think there's also this challenge where a lot of the custody infrastructure, it's been built for investing. It's been built for holding Bitcoin, starting with cold storage. And it's one thing if you're just holding an asset for an extended period of time. It's another thing if you want to do thousands of transactions per second, moving funds in and out of a custody infrastructure. And like that's not easy to do. And so I think it takes time to get to the point where institutions can understand the new infrastructure. It takes time for the companies to mature and be built where they could be enterprise grade, where they could pass risk reviews. And so I think that's been one of the biggest things. And at this point, it's pretty clear every payments company needs a stablecoin strategy. There are people inside the business working on stablecoins. At what stage they're in, how mature their infrastructure is, what they're doing in-house versus what they're outsourcing, I think that's where it really varies. But over time, I think that you're just going to see more and more of a default that particularly if you're moving money cross-border, you need to have some component of being able to use stablecoins within those flows.
Yeah, so let's take that one step further. Let's say, we get the regulatory clarity. You've got more stablecoin issuers. You've got merchants that have real, strategies around this and how value is going to be transferred. We're 10 years down the line from now. Stablecoins are what you, I, and a lot of folks here think it will be. I mean, what is Visa doing 10 years from now as it relates to stablecoins?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the areas that we spend a lot of time thinking about now is like the holy grail for like global money movement is real-time, low-cost cross-border. Like that doesn't exist, and it's very clear that cross-border payments have a lot of room for improvement. There are a lot of legacy systems and processes, and I think that there's one world where sure, if both sides have stablecoins and understand it, you can just send a stablecoin from one consumer to another consumer, and like that's a peer-to-peer transaction. But there's a lot more volume that's actually flowing between banks cross-border, and so we're fascinated with this concept of the stablecoin sandwich, and this idea of abstracting stablecoins away and just using it for a cross-border leg between fiat to fiat account payments. So if you want to send money from the U.S. to Mexico, can you convert USD into USDC, move it into Mexico in real time, and then convert it back out to MXN? And I think you'll see more and more advanced kind of global 24/7 real-time payment networks that use stablecoins on the back end in this model. And I just think that the volume of flows that start in fiat and end in fiat are so much greater than the volume and flows that will go starting in a stablecoin, ending in a stablecoin. And so I think that's a really exciting opportunity. And ultimately, I think the other takeaway that we've had is that the infrastructure over time is going to become more and more accessible. What's really going to matter is distribution. And I think in general, just software is going to get commoditized more and more. And the question is, who has distribution? Who is connected to payment originators, whether they're merchants or banks? And if you can provide world-class stablecoin infrastructure to a network of 10 to 15,000 banks and 100 million merchants, we think that there's a huge opportunity for Visa to play a major role in these flows, and particularly with the cross-border use cases, that's a major focus for us.
Sure. What can the crypto community do at this point to help Visa accomplish your goals, if anything?
Yeah, I think just the continued kind of bottoms-up innovation around new consumer and business-facing stablecoin wallets. And this difference between, like, it's one thing to try and get someone to download a crypto exchange and to navigate their way through an order book and go to get past the meme coins kind of flashing in your face, to then find the stablecoin feature, to then go buy gas, to then pick your chain and then send it. It's another thing to just say, download this app and send me dollars. You could sign up with an email, and that's it. And I think we're just at the cusp of those first experiences that are making it that easy, but there's still a long way to go. And I think that there's potential for a world where you could have thousands and thousands of new fintech products that go to market, but they're all interoperable with each other because they share this kind of common backend of public blockchain infrastructure. And then I think when you combine it with all the innovations that are happening in DeFi, if you imagine a world where if 1 billion people have a wallet with a stablecoin in it, then what else can you do? Are there real-world assets that you can then use that to purchase? Are there interesting lending and on-chain credit facilities that you could bring into it? And so I think there are all these other pieces that can be combined once you kind of get that first part right of just getting stablecoins in consumer and business wallets in a seamless way where the complexity is abstracted behind the scenes. So we love the crypto developer ecosystem. I think that's one of the biggest strengths of Solana that we've seen over the past year, and trying to do everything we can to help at the early stage of the journey, developers figuring out how to interact with fiat, both in on-ramps, getting funds on, as well as off-ramps and issuing cards. So any crypto developers we're excited to work with on the fiat side.
That's great. And then I guess last question to close it out. I mean, you are sitting in a pretty unique seat at Visa at the intersection of TradFi and crypto and DeFi, stablecoins. Who are going to be the big winners, do you think, as it relates to stablecoins? And who are going to be the losers?
I think on the big winner side, as I mentioned, it's whoever has distribution. Like, trust and distribution, I think, are the two most important things in this world. And I think convincing a new entity, I mean, you guys see this within your own organizations, convincing an institution to do something new, to purchase a new type of asset, is really hard to do. Convincing a payment company or a merchant or a bank to use a new payment rail or to use a new form factor of a currency is really hard to do. And so I think that really is going to lead to the winners of who can convince net new participants who drive significant trillions of dollars of payment volume today to use these new rails for the first time. And we think Visa is very well positioned to do that.
Awesome. Well, Cuy, thank you very much for joining us. Absolute pleasure. Everyone give it up for Cuy.
Thanks for having me.